Hello friends, I would like to preface this video with a few things because this is undoubtedly going to touch upon some rather inflammatory topics. First, the criticism I'm going to be offering against Hench has primarily to do with how he handles people disagreeing with his position on oil, which is a rather contentious topic within veganism. Regardless of where you stand on the issue of oil, whether you're pro, against, or somewhere in between, I would like to ask that you at least recognize that those who open discussions about this, as Hench does, should also be willing to look at criticisms regarding what they say. So your evaluation of my criticism of Hench should stand independent of your personal views on oil, as that has no bearing on the honesty with which he engages the topic. Secondly, if you do find yourself disagreeing with anything I say in this video, or anything Matt and I said in our initial response to Hench, we're more than willing to talk things out with you, and you can join my Discord server linked in the description, which has a dedicated channel for discussing these things. Finally, this is not a hit piece on Hench. This is simply one area of concern for me when it comes to his content, and every single one of my efforts to reach out has been ignored or dismissed, so I'm left with the option of making a video. And I'll elaborate upon that later. I think that all of us should want someone who is representing our positions to do so in a respectable, honest manner. Consequently, if you consider yourself anti-oil or an oil skeptic or something similar, I would argue that you should want someone representing your view who is familiar with the science and can defend it, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. I've kind of already alluded to what my criticism is in the intro, but just to state it rather explicitly, Hench Herbivore misinterprets the science surrounding oil consumption, and every time someone with domain knowledge on the subject either pushes back on this or reaches out to talk with him, he has a tendency of dismissing them and speaking poorly about their character, such as by lying about the circumstances of his interactions with them. In October of last year, for instance, Dr. Avi reached out to Hench via Instagram DMs, asking to speak with him about the same thing Matt and I wanted to: his claims on oil. Hench simply responded saying he was not interested, and Avi responded wishing him well, letting him know the offer would remain open, and offering help if he ever needed it. How did Hench characterize this interaction? By saying Avi barraged him with messages demanding a phone call.
He didn't get what he wanted there, so then he barraged me with DMs demanding a phone call. I found his manner so obnoxious and condescending that I told him I just didn't want to speak to him. After another barrage of messages, I simply blocked him.
He also states that Avi's one final message to him, which I would find difficult to argue was anything other than diplomatic, was another barrage of messages. He then justifies his refusal to communicate with him by saying Avi's communication style is ineffectual and egocentric.
I'm open to the idea that he could be right and they could be wrong, but because of his ineffectual, egocentric communication style, I just didn't want to converse with him.
So, in sum, Avi respectfully reached out to Hench asking to speak with him about his claims regarding oil. Hench said he wasn't interested. Avi responded letting him know the offer was still open and wished him well, and Hench goes on to lie about the situation, consequently painting him in an unfairly combative, negative light. This trend was also repeated with me when I reached out to Hench. First, I sent him an Instagram DM asking if he would be willing to come on my channel and discuss some of his nutritional claims. Whenever I have an issue with what someone says, I typically like to reach out first and offer a discussion so they have a chance to defend themselves in a live setting before making a video where that's not possible. No response? Fair enough, maybe he didn't see it. Later, Matt and I did a live stream together responding to the claims made in his video entitled Vegan Killer: 15 Reasons Not to Eat Oil Ever. Just to give some examples of the ways in which Hench either misinterpreted or misrepresented science here, he cited a study that looked at the effects of butterfat, not oil, but butterfat, on individuals who already have pre-existing heart issues. He conflates postprandial reactions with persistent reactions, and this means reactions that occur directly after a meal but don't last, with reactions that actually do last, and studies that don't adjust for relevant confounders. When I popped into his live stream letting him know that we responded to him and would be open to chatting with him, he told me that he couldn't be bothered because he was too busy saving animals.
Interspecies. Hi Hench, my friend, and I did a response to one of your videos on oil, and we'd be willing to talk to you about it if you'd like. Just wanted you to know. I can't be fussed, to be honest. I'm just busy trying to save animals more than anything, but thank you.
This is particularly weird to me because if part of his method of animal advocacy is exploring epidemiological data, Wouldn't he want to ensure that what he is saying is actually correct and be made aware of potentially damning criticisms? He then ignored the few messages I sent afterwards, such as the one briefly summarizing our criticisms and letting him know they're easy mistakes to make. But I also know he hid me from his channel, so some of that was probably less him ignoring me and more so my messages just not showing up in his chat. If anyone contests my recollection of these events, I do want to note that I have the entire interaction recorded and will upload it if necessary. When our video was brought up again in a later livestream, Hench said he was not interested in watching little Bellins badmouthing him.
Layla, I think Hench, the title is livestream, Matt Middle versus Hench Herbivore. I'm not interested in watching any little Bellins badmouthing me. It's just irritating.
Which is interesting considering I was stressed at the very beginning of our video that this was not an attack on him, and Matt even mentioned the fact that Hench has plenty of content that he finds enjoyable, and we did our best to remain friendly throughout the entire live stream, in part because we know that things like this can come off as intimidating, so we wanted to let Hench know that he could approach us for a discussion without feeling like he would be ganged up on. Yeah, was there anything you wanted to say before we get started?
Right, yeah, I just kind of wanted to preface with like, I like Hench. Like, he has some hilarious content. And I've watched his videos in the past, and I've been in his position before. I used to like vehemently oppose oils and like argue for their health detriments, but it came clear to me that in like quite a few interactions I had pushback, and I'm like, so looking back at this, I'm like so glad that I had pushback from people that just responded, and I like knew I didn't have an answer and I was wrong. Yeah, like I said, like I like Hench, I like a lot of his content. I just really think he's way off the mark here, and
Alright, and of course if Hench did decide that he wanted to like talk about this live, I'm sure, I'd be willing to host, and I'm sure if you had the time, you'd probably be willing to talk to him.
mhm.
But yeah, that offer's still open. Hench is always welcome to come on and talk about his claims about oil if he wants. When this was mentioned to him, his response was that someone apparently told him that we were giggling little idiots.
Yeah, they don't badmouth, they are very polite and say they like your content. Well, that's not what I heard, but anyway, I can't worry about it. Heard they were like giggling little idiots or something, that's what someone told me.
Note that this is someone else telling him. He didn't even watch the video that he's basing his evaluation of our character off of. I also don't even really know what this is supposed to mean in this context. Yes, there were parts of the live stream where we laughed, but that sometimes happens when you're hanging out with your friends. It can just be an expression of a good mood, not necessarily malicious. However, there were times where I did laugh a bit when I understood the extent of the criticism, but it wasn't to demonize Hench or to come across as rude. It was just an inadvertent reaction I had when I heard some of the things he said. However, I will apologize to Hench for that because it was my goal to remain as cordial in that live stream as possible, and this did admittedly stray a bit from that goal. I also want to note though that it seems very unfair to hold me to its standard when I can't even laugh at something like someone citing studies on butter when discussing oil, but not hold Hench to a standard wherein we expect him to even be honest about the science he's presenting or engage with criticisms and adjust his position when mistakes are pointed out to him. It seems even more unfair to dismiss the entirety of that video, which was overall pretty respectful towards Hench, took weeks of preparation because we delved into the scientific literature of each of Hench's claims, and which my friend, who has a degree in nutrition, set aside time to do on this basis alone. With all of this in mind, the pattern of behavior becomes pretty clear. Hench refuses to engage with people who disagree with him, no matter how polite they are in their interactions with him. He further goes on to lie about their characters, such as by accusing Avi of barraging him with DMs demanding a call, and accusing myself and Matt of badmouthing him throughout our live stream, neither of which are true when you actually look at what Hench is referring to. He consequently continues to misinterpret epidemiological data to his audience, and justifies this by appealing to the fact that plant-based doctors like Gregor agree with what he is saying. I also feel compelled to note at this point that Hench has said that if he's made aware of any data that conflicts with what he said, then he has no issues changing his views.
If new evidence supporting the dermatologist's claims supersedes this, then I'll go along with that with no qualms.
This to me seems performative given the fact that Hench, to my knowledge, has never interacted with criticisms of what he says, and again slanders those who are capable of making such criticisms when they try to speak to him about it. It seems as though he wants the social credit that comes with being open-minded and open to the idea of being wrong without the burden of actually having to amend his views. Additionally, he even includes a little jab at Avi in his video and refers to him, Avi, as a skin doctor, in what appears to be an effort to invalidate his criticisms.
The fact is that all the legendary plant-based doctors that have been having massive success disagree with his perspective. Some of them have been practicing for decades and are experts in this particular field, which doesn't involve the skin. And again, the consensus among all the best plant-based doctors is that he's wrong. So that's a double fail. I mean, which doctors are you supposed to listen to? They can't all be right. Logic much? Richard told me that I should listen to the skin doctor. Honestly, I don't see a lot of kindness here.
This is particularly troublesome to me as I am an avid believer in the idea that the validity of an argument or statement stands on its own independent of who is making it. It doesn't really matter what someone's occupation is as long as they have the ability to properly interpret the data that they're speaking about. I find this to be even more ironic because if he wants to appeal to someone's credentials or lack thereof, what about all of the individuals who disagree with Hench whose field of study is in the relevant domain, such as Danielle Bellardo, a cardiologist, Jenny Messina, a registered dietitian, and Matt Medore, who has a degree in nutrition? Why do they suddenly not count? A concern some people have expressed when I've spoken about this understandably has to do with infighting. I will readily agree that senseless infighting within veganism is an issue and often poses a hindrance to effective activism and perhaps the progression of animal rights. However, we must be careful to not conflate the statement, "we must avoid needless infighting," with "we must never hold vegan influencers accountable for harmful actions." Someone being a vegan does not preclude them from criticism, and intra-group criticism is healthy and necessary in order to put what we say to the test and ensure we are only using the strongest arguments in the course of our advocacy. I would consider misinterpreting science and slandering those who question you and consequently going on to misinform your audience about epidemiology to qualify as harmful behavior worthy of criticism, but obviously whether or not you disagree will depend on your values. It's also worth noting that criticism does not always have to be stressful or awful. Matt and I were totally willing to deliver these criticisms in the form of a respectful, friendly discussion with Hench. He is the one who decided to respond the way he did. And quite frankly, sitting there and listening to him lie about me upset me, and I feel like I have a right to defend myself. We must make sure not to adopt a view wherein Hench is allowed to peddle pseudoscience and subject other vegans to cruelty and slander, but those vegans are not allowed to respond or defend themselves lest they be accused of infighting. We shouldn't set a standard which permits Hench to treat others in this manner while they must just sit there and take it. I do believe in leaving room for people to learn and grow, and I don't believe in always holding someone's mistakes against them. As such, our offer to speak to Hench remains open. If he or anyone else takes an issue with something we've said, then, as previously mentioned, we're willing to discuss it with them and work things out. If Hench is willing to speak with us and we have that conversation, then I'll have no issue removing this video and issuing a public statement amending what I've said about him. As always, thank you for supporting what I do, and I hope to see you in the next video.